Hey guys, I'm Candace, and I was just diagnosed with ADHD the end of last month, and I want to show you what this first full month of my meds has looked like for me, at least creatively. For background, I have spent the last 9 to 10 months struggling to do much of anything beyond the bare minimum. I would start projects and then ignore them for weeks on end if I picked them back up at all. I had all these ideas for art and for knitting designs, for just various things, but I could never actually get past the thinking about planning stage. I spent a lot of time battling what's in my head with actually getting off the couch to go do anything. When I got the ADHD diagnosis, my first instinct was to think, well, shoot, was all of this my undiagnosed ADHD? The reality is probably not, because the more I have journaled, the more I have tried to work through my feelings, I realized that I was dealing with a very healthy dose of burnout and grief. That was also making it hard for me to move anything forward. And I needed to take the time to process all of that. Grief especially is not something that you can just journal your way through or take a couple of days off for rest and magically be better. So in reality, it was a weird combo. But since getting my diagnosis and getting my new meds, this past month has been a whole different world for me. Life-changing, I would actually say. And I want to share with you what I've actually been able to accomplish this month. Because I think I've done more in this last month, art-wise and creatively, than I was able to do in the last 6 months. So, let's take a look. Okay, let's start with things that I finished-ish. This is my sketchbook that I started back in April of last year. So actually a year ago. And I've been slowly working through it. There's just some fun little things. This is where I was working on like my Christmas card. Just random little sketches, notes, some like really awful portraits. Some like weekly journaling, but what I actually did this month, I had worked on this spread of some peaches, which now that I'm looking at it, I realize I never actually went back in and did like the darker colors, the pits, but it's fine. I worked on this little vase. And then this, I didn't actually finish. I finished these. But I went in with acrylic markers because I was having some, like, burnout in art block. And I just did little blobs. And then spring flowers were blooming. So I thought, I will just draw a bunch of spring flowers. So I never actually finished the mascari. But I did a daffodil and I worked on a violet. Those are two of my favorites. And then I had taken this photo of the sunset that was on April 9th. And it was this gorgeous, we have this church downtown, and it was this gorgeous sunset, and the clouds were like purpley and orange from the sunset hitting it, and it was just really pretty. So one morning I just decided that I was going to just play. And I just sat on the couch for 30 minutes or so and sketched this out and then added color. And then I just took a little bit of like pen and kind of like deepened some things. It's not perfect at all, but it was just fun to play. And that was it on that sketchbook. The things that I'm really proud of was this strawberry. So I actually set up a photo box here in my studio. You can kind of see I got my oil painting palette here. I've got a window like right here, and then I've got to my right my easel, and this has just kind of become my oil painting corner in my craft room as I've like cleared out my yarn and whatnot. So I set up this still life box with black foam board, and I bought some strawberries at the grocery, and I had some fabric already. So I just painted. Like, I took a bunch of photos and downloaded them from my phone to my computer. I printed some out of ones that I liked, and then I just started painting. And this is, I think, the second real oil painting that I've like completed that was my own, which is very, very exciting. And it's also a little bit of a lesson in frustration, because the first layer of any painting looks awful, and it's really hard for me to see that awful start of the painting and think, oh yeah, this is totally going to turn out. Like, it's this weird thing in my head that I just have this block on of, how is this crappy thing going to become this? And I'll show you with the other ones that I'm working on what I mean. But this one in particular, it's 5x7, so it's not huge, because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time painting like ginormous paintings if it doesn't turn out, and waste all that time just to learn what I'm doing, right? Because I'm still learning. I only started picking up oil painting in September or October of this past year. But I was really, really excited with this because I went through and I did everything on this strawberry except the details. And when I started on the details and I started putting in the little highlights, I kept looking at it and thinking, oh my gosh, this looks awful. And it's because I was like 6 inches from, my face was like 6 inches from this. So I was seeing every tiny little paintbrush stroke, every little gap, all that stuff. And then I took a break and I went up to go get a drink and came back and stood back for my easel. And I was like, holy crap, that actually looks like a strawberry. That looks so good. So I was like super, super excited because I started this and finished this within this month, which is like completely unheard of for me. The other thing that I'm counting as finished this month is I did this painting of this tree, which was my first like completed oil painting, because this was my second. And I learned how to cut my own mat and matted and frame this myself. So now I can like hang this on my wall somewhere. Right now it's been sitting up on my fireplace because I don't know where I'm putting it yet. I just painted the walls of my living room, so I'm still trying to figure out like what art is going to go where. But I was super, super proud, not just because of the texture and details I got in on this tree, but also just how pretty that it looked when it was done. So I was like super, super proud of myself for that. So I also started this month as kind of a creative practice. A ritual is actually what I'm calling it. In the mornings, I get up and I go downstairs to my office desk and I light a candle and I do my morning pages and my journaling. And then I take 10 minutes and I just draw something just as like a warm up. So I started this in the middle of this month and I've actually been pretty consistent with it. I only aim for, my minimum goal is 3 times a week. Sometimes I'll do more than that, but I'm trying to make my habits as small as possible and make them kind of idiot proof so that I don't beat myself up if I fail to get all 5 days. Like, that I still got 3 days is amazing. So like this day I did bottles, and I was doing bottles just from memory. I was trying to come up with, everything that I could shape-wise of what I remembered things were in bottles. And then I decided the next day that I was going to do spoons. And on this one I used my Sailor Food pen, Fude, I can't remember how you pronounce it, which has like you can do it very, very thinly or you can do thicker. But I realized that I don't know that I have ever drawn spoons before in my entire 4 or 5 years of learning to draw. So these were kind of awful. But it gives me something that I know now that I need to practice. I tried just some like loose structures of cats. And again, I'm just doing these for 10 minutes, so they're very loose. I tried this. I took more than 10 minutes because I was doing it at night because I missed that day in the morning. But I tried to do some bunnies. This one was supposed to be like scratching himself, but I think I pulled his leg out way too far. Like it should have been kind of cut off there. I mean, there's other things that are wrong with this, but again, the whole point of this is just to like go in and not judge. This one I used a fountain pen, and I gave myself the prompt of balloons and realized that was too easy. So I found some pictures of some balloon animals and then went back in with my water brush because my fountain pen ink was water soluble, and kind of tried to like wet it down to give it some depth and shadows. I tried just some butterflies, messing around with just a pen. I did keys, and this morning I did just some feathers. And then the other day I actually went through, I was having, I missed my appointment in the morning with myself, and so I sat in the car and I did just some cute little carrots while I was waiting for my haircut. And then the other day, Monday, I was sitting in the car waiting for the gym and did Monday's prompt of mountains from my car in the gym parking lot. So that's been like a fun creative practice that I have started, that if I don't do any art the rest of that day, I know that I at least spent 10 minutes practicing something. Okay, and then let's talk about the most recent whips that I'm working on. Going back in line with the strawberries, I took another one of my reference photos of strawberries, and this one you can tell is significantly bigger. This is actually a 12 by 12 canvas board. And I am in the process of finishing this up. I have more work I want to do on these strawberry leaves to kind of define them and add texture a little bit more. I struggled a lot with this one because this plate was actually an iridescent, like 1960s, 1970s moon glow milk glass. So it was a white milk glass that has like an iridescent glaze to it. The problem I had is the plate that I have was like really textured, and I knew that I was not going to be good enough yet to do all that texture because I was going to have to do all this geometric design to it, capture all the different colors, and I just wanted to like make it plain and easy. Just give the impression of the iridescence without stressing myself out too much, right? Because this is only like my third self-constructed piece of art that I have done. With the exception of the stuff that I did in my original oil painting class, which I don't necessarily count because they weren't like my own reference photos. They were things that I found online and just painted from. But I think I pretty much nailed how I wanted this to look after I did a bunch of investigation online, looking at iridescent plates from other places online. And I had the same problem again with the strawberries, that I was going in and I was putting in layers, and I was feeling frustrated and felt like, oh my gosh, these look so flat and so boring. And then I went in and started putting in the seeds and putting in some of the texture and the highlights, and then same thing happened. I thought it looked like crap. I walked away, I came back and stood back from it, and I was like, holy crap, those look like strawberries. I think the only thing I'm going to do to this, besides trying to fix some of these colors, is I think I'm going to go back in with a little bit more of like maybe a red glaze over some of this to kind of make this look a little bit less orangey. Although frankly, it kind of looks like strawberries in 3 stages, right? Like this one is super fresh. This one's one that's like really nice and red and ripe, almost like just on the edge of of being past its prime. And then this one actually kind of almost looks like it's slightly aged. So I don't know, maybe I'll do a layer of oil over top and oil it out and see how it looks once it's like glazed, to kind of get an idea of like when it's shiny, what it's going to look like. But that's the initial plan. So this one's a whip that I'm not quite done with, but I'm like super, super close. And I've actually consistently worked on this for like the last 3 weeks, which is also unheard of. And then we have this one. So this is kind of what I was talking about, where that like first stage of painting that I am like, oh my God, what am I doing? So I have this cute little terracotta pot that I picked up, I think at like an antique store in Kentucky or something. We got it on vacation somewhere. It was like $2 or $3 and I loved it, and so I snatched it up. And then I have these little flowers that I got at the grocery store a couple weeks ago. And so I was just playing with my light box and some fabric that I had in my sewing stash. And then this was a book that I had just gotten in the mail, and I loved the way that all these colors kind of played together. This is meant to be like a more corally bright orange, versus you got the terracotta, and then this is like, bright turquoise, and these really dark, pretty, almost plum flowers. But this is the first coat, right? So like when I'm looking at this, I am looking at it and I'm like, holy crap, this looks awful and terrible. But I know once I go in with my second coat and I start laying in more details and I start cleaning up, like this is a little too high back in here for the angle, so I just need to kind of like cover that back up with some of my background, and I start adding in more shading, I know that it's going to end up turning around and looking way better. I just have to get to that point, right? I haven't done the second coat, but I started this, you guys. Like, not only did I take pictures, reference photos to try to make this, but I drew out on the canvas and laid down my first coat, which never would have happened last month before these meds. I would have just sat here thinking about how I should take reference photos. Or if I took the reference photos, I would sit here thinking about, oh my gosh, like, why am I not doing anything with those? Get off your butt and go paint or draw or do something. So I'm calling this a win for this month, just because I actually started the first process of it. And I do plan by, if not today, definitely Thursday, I am going to spend more time working on it to make it look even more like what I imagine. So, yeah, that's all the stuff that I have actually been working on, which part of me feels like that wasn't a lot. Like, I've seen other people with their, oh, look at the art I made this week or this month, and they are making so much, and it's very hard for me to not compare myself to other people. I will say that one of the things that has kind of helped me so far this month has been that concept of rituals in routines, and kind of embracing the way my brain works a little bit more. I've always kind of suspected that I was ADHD, but when my doctor initially suggested I get assessed for it, it was a little bit like a punch to the gut, because it was someone else recognizing and seeing the things that I have been internally struggling with and feeling myself. And there was a moment where I kind of broke down and cried and wondered if things from my past, like my shop specifically, would have been different if I would have been diagnosed before, if I would have had meds that helped me. Would I have been able to stay creative? Would I have been able to stay on top of the marketing and the reports and the inventory and planning classes and all the things that went into making the shop, but that I struggled so hard with to keep on top of, especially towards the end. But I think ultimately it wouldn't have changed anything, right? There are certain things that happened and that I needed to happen within that business that didn't happen. And no matter how much energy and how medicated I was, that wasn't going to change anything. So I feel like right now that I am medicated, now that I have the ability to get off the couch and actually go do the things that I want to do, that I need to do, I have been kind of channeling this last month into more of a pattern of trying to embrace being an artist, and embracing what that even means to me. It's very hard for me to call myself that, and I don't know why. It's something I'm still kind of working on. I think it's because when I think of someone calling themselves an artist, I think that they are doing it professionally. They are in galleries. They are running their own sales of prints and things like that. And that's very much rooted in capitalism and not necessarily a valid way to look at things. And I recognize that. I know that. But it's been really interesting to kind of reframe everything and have these rituals and routines instead of looking at things as I have to do this on this date, I have to do that on that date. If I miss a day here, I'm never going to get anything done again. Or if I don't paint today, I'm never going to paint again. And it's been interesting and kind of freeing to understand that I don't need to work 8 hours a day honing whatever skill that I'm working on, because as a creative person, I need to be out of the house. I need to go experience life because that's what inspires me and gives me ideas for new things. I need to sit and read books, fiction books and nonfiction books, to continue to be creative. That I don't have to like work myself into a hole in the way that I have in the past to be the person and have the creative life that I want. So that's kind of been like an interesting shift. And I'm still, obviously, I mean, it's only been a month of me being on these meds. I'm still in that transition process. I'm still learning how to be that person. But it's very refreshing to be in that feeling now, because I would have never thought last year when I was in the middle of closing my shop down and wondering what in the hell am I going to do next. It's kind of refreshing to be comfortable with where I am. I will say part of my morning ritual, as I kind of like mentioned, I get up, I light a candle, I do my morning pages. If you haven't read The Artist's Way, morning pages is basically a chain of thought journaling. You're just writing whatever comes to mind. You're supposed to do 3 pages. Most days I manage to do 2. Some days I manage to do 1, and that's fine. I'm not going to beat myself up about not doing some arbitrary length that someone else thinks that I should do to be a better artist. Like, just do what works for you, right? So I do my morning pages just to kind of like get some things out. Most of the time, it's just me writing about what I did the day before and my to-do list for the day. But it's been incredibly helpful, helping me process, okay, what am I even doing today? Because I have a lot of days where I get up and I'm just like, I've got 8 hours to myself. What am I doing? And then if I don't plan on anything, I will fall into the trap of scrolling on my phone or sitting on my computer for too long and not actually doing things that, not that I need to be doing, but stuff that I even want to be doing, right? And then I added in, after I'd been doing that for a little bit, I added in the morning warm-up sketches where I'm just drawing, for 10 minutes. I have it's like a little hexagonal timer that I got on Amazon that when you turn it on, you just like put it to the side. It almost looks like a giant dice. You put it to whatever side that you're on, and then it counts down. And so I just put that for 10 minutes. And when the timer goes off, sometimes I keep drawing because I'm in the middle of shading or something. sometimes I'm just done. But that's enough to just kind of like get me started for the day, I guess, and kind of in that creative thought process. And worst case, if I don't draw the rest of the day, I've still done my morning warm up. And then the thing that I've been most recently adding in is trying to do a little bit of reading. And I don't mean reading in like a nonfiction book for pleasure. I mean reading in more of a context of things that support me as an artist. My go-to lately, and it actually was my go-to when it first came out too, but my go-to has been We Need Your Art from Amy McNee. I read through it cover to cover initially, and right now what I am doing is I will go into the contents and say, okay, I feel like reading on procrastination. Like, I feel like I've been procrastinating a lot lately, so I'm going to read that. And then she has little prompts for journaling at the end of the chapters, but I don't even do those. A lot of times I'll just read, like if I'm reading about procrastination, then I will add to my morning pages and journal the thoughts and feelings that I have regarding what I read and how that applies to me. Another book that I actually just got that I'm adding to my morning reading list is this Daily Rituals Women at Work. I tried reading the first one and it was very male-centered, and the author acknowledges that in this one, but I, as a woman, as a wife and a mom with other responsibilities that I can't farm out to a spouse so that I can just shove myself into my art and ignore the world, it was a little off-putting. But when I realized that there was this one, the library didn't have it for me to check it out ahead of time. It wasn't on the online digital library either, so I just bought myself a copy. And I have started just like every morning or so, I'll just read a little bit, maybe like 2 or 3 people worth, depending on the length of the little snippet about them, just to kind of see like how other artists who are women have pursued their artwork as well. And then after I get done with that, I take my kid to school, I run some errands, and move on with my day. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but again, a month ago I was sitting on the couch. I would get home from dropping my kid off and sitting on the couch beating myself up, wondering why I can't get moving. So it's been kind of amazing to have these meds. They're not a fix-all. I will preface that. I have noticed that sometimes even if I take them, they don't seem like they're working. And I have kind of learned that I have to work with them. I can't expect them to do everything for me, which I know sounds like common sense. But I didn't know how I would even react to them. I didn't know what the experience was going to be. So I have learned that if I take a little bit of time, plan out my day, or even plan out my whole week, as long as I have some sort of plan going into my day, it's a lot easier for me to like see the next thing on my to-do list and actually go do it. Versus if I don't plan anything for the day, I'm at risk of just being a bump on the couch again. Right back where I was. But yet not right back where I was, right? Because at least now if I think of something, like I just painted my whole living room last weekend because I thought, hey, we've been planning on doing this a while. I already had the color picked out and everything. So I was just like, we're going to do this now. I would have never done that last month or 6 months ago. It would have just dragged out, and I would have, if I started it at all, I would have gotten like 2 walls done and then abandoned the project. And then we'd have 2 walls painted one color and 2 walls the old color, and it would have been awful. So I think in that context, it's definitely been nice. But we will see, though, how this next month goes. The longer I am on these meds, I'm kind of interested to see how that changes things. And if I continue being this productive, or if it like peaks and drops off, like we'll see. But I'm really, really, really excited to feel like a normal person again, if that makes sense. I feel like anyone who's like been ADHD late diagnosed probably totally gets what I'm talking about. But yeah, so that's all I got. I am hoping, knock on wood, I'm hoping that going forward I can do more of these once a month. Hey, look what I did videos, and actually stick with this time and not go 6 months between videos. And I'm hoping that I can have some more knitting content to share as well, though that's going to be much slower because I am finding my hands hurt when I knit, especially if I try to knit for extended periods. So my knitting has definitely dragged to a molasses pace at this point. But I will take knitting slow over not being able to knit at all, because it has absolutely been one of my favorite things that I have learned to do in life. But yeah. Drop me a comment if you got questions or if there's something you're curious about. I tend to be kind of an open book about things that go on in my life. And if you just want to like vent about how you're struggling with your ADHD too, especially if you're a creative person, I'm right there with you. So see you guys next month though.